everything.
Okay. I've pressed again. Sorry, everybody. Just bear with me.
Looking good now. It's working now.
Okay, working now. Great. So this is the agenda for our meeting tonight, which of course is on the 8th of July, not on the 13th of May, and for that I apologise. Where was I? Yes, an update on the Gungahlin Crematorium project, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion on a few things led by Natalie Bishop's team, a couple of different speakers, including her boss, I think, and talking about our Gold Creek homestead sale process, the Throsby Community Garden, and I know there's been quite a bit of interest in that based on Facebook and email, and some update on the Mingle program in Gungahlin. And finally, Peter Steele will be back to give us an update on the reintroduction of the update to Network 19 of the bus infrastructure network. Right, so onwards. Look, major things that have kept us busy, and one thing I forgot to mention in June is that the Gungahlin Community Council has secured a $10,000 grant towards the Celebrate Gungahlin Festival, which will now be in early 2020. This is really great news, and we're very excited to have got that funding in place, because that means it's almost certain that we'll be able to press ahead and deliver that event to bring it back after a couple of years where it's been, we've had some challenges getting it up. So that's great news, and we thank the ACT Government Events ACT for their support.
Do you want to sit with me?
And for those who are online, perhaps you'd like to mute, please. Surely we don't have to remind people of that. David, if you could perhaps grab some of those people and mute them if they haven't had a chance to do that.
I'm just going to listen to this. Okay, you have to be quiet.
Just a second.
Go away.
Yeah, well, that's another way of solving the problem. So,
they're talking. You can listen. Okay.
Participants.
This sucks.
Right. I think we'll fix that. So the second thing that's consumed a bit of our time is providing support primarily to the YMCA, who have been campaigning very strongly against the amended establishment, now called the Establishment Development Application. This is for an 18-storey building on the corner of Gozard Street and Gundaroo Drive. Originally approved in 2018, an amended DA's gone in, and we've spoken about this at our previous meetings. I did have the number of this. I think it was around 80 representations were lodged on this developed application. But subsequent to that, a number of things have come to light, including the fact that the developer has chopped down the regulated tree that was on the site, noting that the development application had approved the chopping down of the tree, but you can't actually chop down the tree until you've got a building permit, and it appears that that hadn't been issued. So that's a bit disappointing. And there are some ongoing quite complex issues around some lease variation processes that I'm not confident, based on what I've seen, have really been executed particularly well by the leasing group within planning development. So there's a lot of complexity around that. The Community Council has been opposed to the establishment Air Towers project since its inception. We've put in a representation, we supported the community to put in their representation, and we've definitely actively supporting the YMCA and their efforts. But a lot of this comes down to the YMCA's interactions around what they have done with their lease and what the developer's done and so on. Very complicated. But it became something that's we're actively engaged in. We've spoken a bit to Territory, Transport Canberra and Community Services, City Services about the fast track program, a bunch of very small infrastructure projects being done around Canberra. And certainly if anyone in Gungahlin has a footpath that needs to be laid where it hasn't been one before, or some minor works that they can suggest, I would strongly encourage you to get in touch with us so we can pass that on to the team in TCCS, and so they can consider whether that might be included in that pandemic stimulus program where the government's funding a number of smaller projects. We've been done a bit of work supporting Pedal Power and their efforts to capture the opportunity around people starting to walk and ride more as a result of the pandemic shutdowns and so on, and converting that into more active travel for work. And so we've been supporting their work efforts. And just today, we've had flagged with us the development application for the next phase of Jacker, the suburb of Jacker. And in particular, the potential impact this may have on the heritage listed Elm Grove estate. Now, just to give people a bit of context for this, this is lifted out of the development application, which closes this Friday. So we've only, well, I personally only become aware of it today. But the important thing to notice is that Stage 3 of Jacker is actually already completed. That's at the very bottom of this map. Then Stage 1 is kind of the core middle area around a proposed series of ponds and a commercial area, retail and all that. And then Stage 2 is this piece in relative north. The piece that I want to draw your attention to is this rectangle here. This is Elm Grove. That particular rectangle is the longest operational farm in the ACT, well, certainly in northern ACT, been producing wool since about the 1850s, and has a number of heritage listed sites on that site, within that rectangle, but there are some others elsewhere in this development that they have some significant concerns over. So we've only just got some information about this in the last 4 or 5 hours. We'll try and get some details up, but any resident can go and look at this development application, and most of the issues that have been raised by the Elm Grove folk relate to its impact on their ability to continue to run a farm, the impact on the heritage listing that they have in place, and a number of environmental impacts that they believe haven't been addressed. So literally breaking news, so I'm just passing that on at this time. So I'll pause briefly there in case anyone's got any questions or issues they just want to flag with us.
Yeah, hi, this is Terence.
Hey, Kieran.
Terence.
Kieran.
Terence, yeah.
Oh, Terence, sorry.
No worries. So you mentioned that you only just were informed of this. Why is the GCC not by default an initial consultation body or notified as and when it gets published?
That's a really good question. Some of you might be aware that the development application process in the ACT has just a very major review of the process has been just completed, where 66 recommendations were made on improving the DA process, and better for notifications is one. There is no mechanism to directly register online to get DAs in a certain area. There is an app provided by EPSDD that is in theory meant to notify you of these things, but I have to be honest, my experience with it's very poor. But you can go to the e-development website and you can find these, but the notification process is broken. It's very poor.
You would think with the proper community engagement is that as soon as it gets published, you would be on as a major community group within the Gungahlin area, that you'd be first on the list as a notification point, just as a point of courtesy.
Yep. Yep.
And good consultation would include an organisation like yourself.
Yeah. So certainly the SLA spoke to the community council at a community council meeting. I'm going to say it was middle of last year, might have been early last year, about the proposed plans. It was extremely high level at that stage, although it doesn't look to have changed much from the slides that were shown then. But the formal processes don't do that, and unless a number of triggers are set off around a development, usually around the value of the cost. For example, all developments that are over 6 stories are meant to have a community engagement plan, and sometimes it's very lightweight and sometimes it's very good. And I can talk about a couple of those as well. But no, it's a broken process, and yeah, we do rely on residents on occasions to bring these things to our attention, and that's what's happened here. So I guess the key takeaway until the DA process is fixed is I would encourage all residents who are looking, who are interested in these developments and their impact, to look at the e-development website and let us know if you've got any concerns.
Thanks, Peter.
No worries. Any other questions? All right. Look, I just then, as always happens, that question's prompted me to mention another thing. We have had, the Community Council's had meetings with two different developers developing sites in what I call East Gungahlin. That's essentially to the east of the Gungahlin Club. One is actually adjacent to the Gungahlin Club, and one is on one of the sites sold a couple of months ago, right over at the far northeastern corner of the town centre. And both of them are using a planning company called Canberra Town Planning, who have been very active in encouraging the developers to speak to the community first and before they lodge a DA, which is a really positive sign because it mitigates some of the concerns and surprise effects. So those meetings were held, and then the developer had an open court meeting last Thursday evening, which was advertised by us on our Facebook page, and hopefully residents were able to get their feedback then. But they're the other two elements that have been happening. All right, I will keep the talking stick for just a few more seconds. This is the update I received from Kieran Fordham, who's with a company called Lockbridge, which is doing a lot of the engagement work for the Krunic Group, who own the block that is going to have both the cinema and the Defence Housing Authority building on that site across the road from Coles. And his update is that not only have they got the development approval, they've also got their building approval, so they're pretty much ready to go. And the holding company has appointed construction control to start the development. And so what we'll see is construction starting in 2020, and they're hoping to be all done by 2022, which is pretty consistent with what they said before, although a start date in 2020 is in August is a little bit later than was originally planned. And just from a logistics point of view, the construction access will be from F. Kapiti Street at the existing driveway location. So that's in front of the Gungahlin Club. And all car parking for people working on the site will be located on the site, which will be a pleasant change for some of these big developments end up attracting a huge workforce, and sometimes it gets a bit difficult to park around them. So that's all I have on the DHA cinema update. Was there any questions on that one? No. All right. Well, it's not my pleasure to introduce Cara Dunn. Cara, do you have any slides you wish to present?
No, I don't, Peter.
Cool. All right. That's fine. We'll just go.
Camera on. Hi,
yep.
Everyone.
No. All working well. So I'd like to introduce Cara Dunn. Cara's with ACT Cemeteries, who gave us an update on what they were doing in Gungahlin a couple of 3 or 4 months ago, and this is a bit of an update on where that's at.
Thanks, Peter. So you're absolutely right. We did come and visit the Gungahlin Community Council when you were still meeting in person. That must have been in early March, I think, before the restrictions started. So good to see that you've all adapted really well to the Zoom meetings and everything seems seamless, which is fabulous. My name's Cara.
I'm glad we've faked it.
I think everyone's enjoying the technology every now and then. My name's Cara Dunn. I'm the interim CEO with Canberra Cemeteries, which is the ACT Public Cemeteries Authority, which is part of Transport Canberra and City Services. Bit of a mouthful with the ACT government. So we did come and do a presentation to GCC earlier in the year and provided an overview of the crematorium project. It's the first public crematorium for the ACT. At that stage, we were still in project planning mode and getting all of our ducks in a row to commence the project. Then we obviously had the COVID-19 pandemic start to roll out across the nation and in the ACT at that time. So we actually fast-tracked the crematorium project through the public health emergency and changed our timeframe for it. Originally, we were looking at having the crematorium completed by December 2020, and we still will complete the full project by then, but we brought forward the stage 1 component of the crematorium development, which is essentially the crematorium comprises the cremator equipment located within the cemetery, and it will be in a fit-for-purpose facility. So we are looking to open that facility in October this year to the public. We had a turning of the sod event on the 26th of June with the Minister for City Services, Minister Steele, and construction has commenced forthwith. We are then post-October going to commence stage 2 development works on the project, which will comprise the public component of the facility. We have engaged with some faith groups and cultural groups in the ACT to better understand their needs associated with cremation. And we've come to understand that viewing the cremation and performing certain rituals around the cremation is of faith and cultural significance to a number of groups. So we are accommodating those needs by providing a viewing room within the crematorium and some associated amenities that will support those faith and cultural needs. That will take a little bit more time, so the viewing room will be completed by December and come online in January next year.
Great. It was, I must say, I found the whole presentation about what the ACT cemeteries, I'm sorry, I've shortened the name, it's a much longer name, do, and the nature of that that operation was really interesting. And it seemed like the crematorium project really had broad community support in a whole bunch of different areas that you, and for a whole bunch of reasons you might not be aware of if you've got a pretty, I don't know, boring Anglo-Saxon background like mine. So yeah, I found it really interesting, and it seemed like you've got a lot of communities engaged and supportive of the project.
Thanks, Peter. Look, absolutely. And cremation is actually increasingly becoming the preferred option for the majority of people Australia-wide, and particularly in the ACT. So as people decide to cremate their loved one after they pass away, rather than go ahead with the burial, we're certainly seeing an increased demand for cremation in the ACT. And because there has not been a public crematorium before, the ACT in general has been struggling to meet that demand. Mm-hmm. So certainly the public crematorium will go a long way towards meeting the needs of the ACT community, particularly those diverse faiths and cultures. And as I said earlier, with the addition of the viewing room and associated front of house facilities, people can make a choice, irrespective of their faith or culture, to actually farewell their loved one, in addition to a funeral service, by viewing the initiation of the cremation.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Are there any questions from the audience about that project? Not from Terence. Okay. Well, okay, sorry, I was just from a sequencing point of view, just check my agenda. All right, well, thank you very much, Cara, for coming along. And it's really great to see you making the time to come and let us know how things are progressing. And it's good to see that the project's going well.
Thank you. Absolutely, it's a pleasure. And certainly towards perhaps the end of the year, if we can provide another update once we're operational and we're progressing the stage 2 work, certainly would be a fabulous opportunity to keep everyone up to date.
Yep, that'd be great. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. Okay, so the next update is from the Suburban Land Agency, and I think Irina's leading that conversation, but it's covering a range of topics, but focusing on the Gold Creek Homestead project, which is in the sales phase now, the proposed community gardens in Throsby, and I think there's quite a lot of interest in that, and other projects and activities going on in Gungahlin on the back of the Mingle project. So, Irina, are you ready to take the helm? Whoop, you can't do that until I let go of the helm. Okay, sorry, that's my fault. Escape. All right. Right, so you should be able to share your content now. Sorry, that's my fault.
Sure. I just wanted to say hello to everyone and thank you, Peter, for the invitation to present on behalf of Suburban Land Agency on the engagement that's been undertaken for the Gold Creek Homestead land sale. I'll be passing the baton on to my colleagues on the next subject after the presentation. I just wanted to say as well, I have a couple of members of the team who really did front this whole engagement on behalf of the Urban Projects team. Natalie Bishop is also here, as well as Ashley Haltina, and Ashley will be joining me throughout the presentation at certain points of discussion. I don't think I've actually introduced myself. Irina Sharp, Development Director for the Urban Projects team at the Suburban Land Agency. The engagement was run by Petra Oswald, who absolutely deserved some rest. She's on leave this week, so I'm presenting on her behalf, really. And what I'm presenting is really the presentation we gave to the community panel at our very last meeting, which was an update of where things are at. So we're sharing the same information with you. And this presentation, if not already, will be published on the SLA's website as well. Mm-hmm. So, not being an expert Zoom user, I'm going to give this a second go. And please tell me if all is well.
Things look well.
Things look well. Thank you.
It's all coming up, Irina. It's Ashley here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Ash. Okay.
So I think we just need to go to full screen mode, perhaps, if that's possible. But if not, fire away.
Pretty good.
It's pretty good. Don't
yeah, it's pretty good.
Too much. Okay. So I'd just like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people who are the traditional custodians of this land on which we are meeting, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. As I said, this was a presentation given to the community panel previously, so maybe some elements in the text are not relevant, but we were really, this slide is particularly around the logistics of using these types of forums and what happens if we can't hear or see each other. But I think you probably got that covered, so I will just pass through this slide. The engagement that we undertook for the Gold Creek Homestead is a particular model of engagement that we tend to use for sites where SLA elects to have a particular interest in the final development outcome. And we are applying this level of engagement right up front with the community in order to capture the interest of the community and the ideas from the community as to what the site could deliver. At this point in time, we have concluded the process of creating the tender documents and publishing the documents to the market and generating interest in the market for the land sale of the site. And part of the documentation is an Aboriginal cultural heritage assessment, which was done very recently. And it did identify an area within the site where a higher level of sensitivity would need to be applied in terms of excavation, and certain protocols will need to be followed should any artifacts be found or any references to the Aboriginal culture be found. The documentation that we provide with the tender also includes a site investigation report, which really paints the picture about the characteristics of the land, the site itself, the soil, planning requirements for the site, and sort of the engineering aspects that buyers would need to be aware of. The tender documents were released on 23rd of June, and we are currently in a period where interested parties are reading through those documents and potentially putting together teams to prepare the response to the tender. We are asking for quite a bit in terms of the response. We actually do want to see what their ideas are for the site, what that proposal looks like, and ultimately how it responds to the work that the community panel has undertaken. Now, just for those who may not be aware, the community panel process took place in 2019, in sort of the later part of 2019. And it involved quite a number of meetings where discussions took place around what matters to the community, what are the values across this site for the community, and what they would like to see transpire in these future ideas for the site. So the outcome of that particular engagement, which was facilitated by an independent engagement consultant, was also supported with a couple of experts in the field, experts in heritage who have had prior knowledge and have done work on the Gold Creek homestead itself, but also expert consultants in placemaking who really kind of captured the essence of all of the discussions that took place in those workshops with the community panel. And the product of that engagement is the precinct development brief, which outlines 5 themes that the future buyers of the site are currently considering and working towards how to respond to it. The themes that were strongly represented in this brief are about the new place with a long past. And this theme really deals with the recognition of the local history as a key factor in forming the identity of the place. Theme 2 was very much about it being the future development being a caring, inclusive and a safe place. And this is really trying to capture future purpose and use of the place. So on one hand, we do have what the land is zoned for, and there are a number of uses that zoning, which is a community zone site, there are a number of uses listed in a planning context that this site could be used for. But what this particular theme deals with is that the site potentially should not focus just on one particular use, that it really should look at the overall notion of the community that will be represented on the site, and maybe multiple uses could be considered. Theme 3 is very much about a rural oasis, and this is the look and feel of the place and the visual character of the place. and whether that character can then translate into the future development as well. Theme 4 is about sustainability. And this is very much about management of environmental and social risks, but also the impacts of the future development and how that is going to be dealt with. And finally, and most importantly, and what makes this community engagement process really different from others is the desire to continue the engagement in a kind of forum and at a same level that we have engaged thus far. And we would like the developers to think about continuing this same forum, whether it's with the exact same members of the community panel or there are some new members that will come through, but the methodology clearly has worked and would be useful going forward. The development we are looking for, we do have some minimum criteria that we want anyone who's making a submission to respond to. These requirements are outlined again in the tender documentation. And I think largely supported by the community panel as well. We want to see a development that will achieve a Green Star community rating of 5 stars or better. 5-star is a national benchmark. Anything above 5-star becomes sort of a world benchmark. We also want to see the 30% tree canopy and 30% permeable surface targets addressed and represented in a future proposal. We want cross-block active travel link. So the site at the moment, from a traffic perspective, has only one exit point, but from a pedestrian perspective, actually could establish a really nice link between a cul-de-sac that it's at the very top of it to the roundabout that it's at the very bottom of it. And this is really about ensuring that the future proposal does not just make an inclusive community within the site, but it actually opens itself up to include the communities surrounding the site. And lastly, there needs to be some improved traffic safety at the intersection of Gungahlin Drive and Monty Place. And we have some descriptions, an engineering solution that sits in the site investigation report as well. I will now quickly pass on to Ashley. She will talk us through how we've embedded the community engagement process into the tender documents.
Thanks so much, Irina. So the tenders will be assessed against non-financial and financial weighted assessment criteria. So this is as Irina's pointed out, this is quite a unique opportunity, and we're really trying to capture the place identity of the site, which has sort of formed part of that precinct development brief. So we're looking at sort of a weighted assessment criteria for the precinct development brief of 50%. Now, that might sound like quite a lot, but we're also requesting that proponents provide sort of significant documentation as part of their submission. The first being a concept plan, which addresses the 5 themes, which Irina spoke about a couple of slides ago. In addition to that, we're also looking at a development design strategy and a community engagement and placemaking plan, which addresses some of those things that Irina spoke about in terms of ongoing engagement with community and stakeholders once the developer sort of really sinks their teeth into the project. In addition to that, we're looking at a financial response, and the weighted assessment criteria for that is 30%. In addition, the project team and capability and experience is 10%, and we're really looking at submissions to really outline, you know, their experience in similar projects. This is quite a complex project in terms of the community users that we're looking at on the site, and so we're really looking at sort of the project team to be able to demonstrate that. In addition, we're also looking at the indicative development program, which is a weighting of 10%. And that really just outlines how the developer is going to meet the timeframes which have been set out in the request for tender documentation. Next slide, thanks, Irina. So some of the indicative timelines associated with the sales process, just, I suppose, bear with me with this slide. It is quite a long one, and we're just trying to give you a bit of a feel for the process. So if you do have any sort of queries, I suppose if you could hold them to the end, and I'll sort of step through some of the more technical details. So as Irina mentioned, we've sort of stepped through the engagement phase at the end of 2019. And that's where that precinct development brief was really formed up, which has informed our request for tender documentation. So the request for tender documentation has been formulated, the first half of this year. And as Irina mentioned, the tender opened on the 23rd of June, and it actually closes on the 10th of September. So proponents actually have, quite a while to respond, but bearing in mind that their response has to, capture all of those things that we've spoken about in the previous slide. So there's sort of a lot of work to do in that respect. Once we receive the tenders upon closing in September, they'll then be assessed against the weighted assessment criteria, which I just spoke about in the previous slide. And then following that, we'll then select, a handful of a handful of proponents, and we'll give them an opportunity to make a best and final offer in terms of the financial response, bearing in mind that some proponents may not wish to amend their offer, and we're just sort of providing that opportunity to the top ranking proponents. Once we've received the best and final offers, we'll then be reassessing those tenders and then ranking the top tender, which will then invite that proponent into negotiation. So we're anticipating that process will sort of end in the end of December, so December this year. So once we've identified the top ranked tenderer, we'll then move into the negotiation phase, and that will be around the contract for sale of the Crown lease and the concept delivery deed. Now the CDD, I'll just sort of talk quickly to that, but it basically sets out the requirements, rights and obligations in respect of the development of the land. So we'll be looking at capturing things like the development obligations, which Irina spoke to earlier, which talks to the Green Star requirements, the cross-block link, the 30% targets for permeable surface and tree canopies. But we'll also be looking at capturing the successful tender concept, the community and stakeholder engagement plan, and all of those things that the tenderer will have been successful, their submission will have been successful and based upon. So we're anticipating that those negotiations will bring us up to April 21, where we'll then exchange contracts. So from that phase, April 21 is really when the community and stakeholders will be re-engaged. We're really looking at that phase as I suppose the developer really firms up their development concept and their strategies, which will then be put back to the SLA for endorsement. At that phase, the developer can then submit their development application to planning for approval, and we'll sort of look, I suppose, for a 12-month period between that exchange of contracts to settlement, which is when the DA, we anticipate, is the earliest stage that the DA will be approved. And we're looking at the DA to be approved in accordance with the obligations outlined within the CDD, which I spoke about just earlier. And at that point, the Crown lease will be served, and that will include the obligation to construct in accordance with the approved development application. So we're really wanting to ensure that the developer delivers on everything that they've outlined within their submission and within their engagement when they've been formulating their development application, and that's sort of why that's embedded within the Crown lease.
And I will just add one of the things we haven't mentioned in these slides, but is definitely mentioned in the tender documents, is that the process of the design development after successful tenderer has been selected includes presentations to the National Capital Design Review Panel as well. So they will be getting continuous feedback on their design as they head towards the development application lodgement.
So I suppose we want to sort of outline what the role of the community and stakeholders play moving forward. So I suppose with, as the tenderer is required to provide an engagement and placemaking plan, we're really looking for a developer to go over and above sort of the normal levels of engagement that they may usually undertake. We really want the community to be kept informed, and we want to be able to capture and have regard to community feedback. So that's really built into the RFT and contractual requirements of the successful tenderer.
Ash, is this my cue now?
Yeah, that one's for you, but I'm happy to talk to it if you would like me to.
Sure, keep going.
Okay, so in terms of the marketing for the site, you'll notice that you know, a lot of the imagery that we've provided for really trying to capture that community vibe. So some of the possibilities for the site could be an intergenerational community hub, arts, education and cultural hub, health, sports and recreation precinct. So as Irina mentioned earlier, the site's zoned for community facilities. So, you know, those things could be anything from aged care to child care and so forth. So I suppose the marketing material was really trying to capture that. And I'll just mention that Knight Frank have been appointed as the marketing agents, and so their campaign's underway at the moment. So in terms of the marketing of the site, which I just stepped to, the website is there, which is goldcreekliving.com.au, and we won't play the YouTube video today, but there is a marketing video which is also available on YouTube, and all of this is available on the Suburban Land Agency website. So this presentation, along with these links, will be available if you would like to have a look at some of the marketing material. It is quite a good video, and I think it really captures, you know, the place elements which we're trying to achieve as part of this process. So I'll just really touch on this briefly, but this was presented to, as Irina mentioned, this presentation was presented to the community and stakeholder panel last week, and essentially we'll be seeking panel members' permission to pass on their details should the successful tenderer wish to, or, well, there's a requirement for the community engagement placemaking to continue. And so they'll be engaging with those panel members moving forward with for the process. And I think that sort of brings us to the end. As I mentioned, this was prepared for the community and stakeholder panel. So we've really just tried to highlight the key points this evening, as we're sort of pretty tight on time. And I think we've gone over, but if anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to jump out and ask them. Otherwise, you can contact us through the website, and the information's on there as well.
Yep. Thank you very much, Irina and Ashley. You know, as myself and I think Manul Haq from who's also on the GCC executive, both were on the panel, and although it was a big time commitment from all the members of the panel, I think it was a really good process and something we'd like to see a lot more of. So any questions from anyone online?
There's one from Kevin in the chat.
Kevin? Why did I miss that? Oh, yeah. Yes, Kevin, go ahead.
Okay. The question is, besides panel members, is there any way for community groups to let tenderers know that they're interested in in activities for the site.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I understood the question. Was the question that can any community group let the tenderers know about their interest for the site?
Yes. So community groups have approached us saying that they'd be interested in different things. How can we let the tenderers know that there are people out there who would like to be engaged?
Right. Is this from the engagement perspective or from future use?
Perhaps I can give you a specific example, Irina, to make it
Thank
a
you.
little more concrete. There are a group
Yep.
of Gungahlin gardeners who've got very interested in the idea of establishing a community garden, and a few of them said, "Oh, we'd love to, maybe the Gold Creek side could be used." And so that's one, but there have been others, particularly over the years. There've been others, but that's the specific example. How would they make themselves known to potential tenderers?
Right. At this point in time, sort of the real estate agent is the point of contact for interested parties. We don't know as yet who of all of the parties that will download the tender will in fact submit. A lot of the people who register for the tender often register just for the interest rather than actual attempt to make a submission. Possibly what we can do is through our future engagement with a community panel as we provide updates, we can maybe touch base and discuss a little bit more as to how the interest in the site is playing out and look towards how to include other community groups into that community engagement that will continue after the preferred tender is selected.
It's really a question of letting the tenderers know that there are people out there who do have some ideas, and it would be very useful for the tenderers, I believe, to know what sorts of things there are out there.
Yeah, I think to a certain degree that was the purpose of the community panel as well, to actually capture as many community representatives to feed into the brief that we've created. But let us think about that, and maybe we can touch base with Peter and come back to you.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of letting people know that having a place where the tenderers can go. It's not forcing anything onto tenderers. It's just giving them a place that they can go and say, "Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. We might be able to do things." So the people like the Water Watch and other land care groups are interested in this sort of thing. People interested in doing things with the like there's been an artist group who were interested in using the homestead for the place and so forth. So that would be useful for the tenderers, I believe.
And I suppose just sort of going back to Irina's point, I suppose as well, is once we have identified a successful tenderer, there will be a requirement for them to continue their community and stakeholder engagement. And so once sort of a preferred option's been identified, there will still, I suppose, be an opportunity to provide that feedback as part of that process, because the developer will be required to continue community engagement and capture that feedback where it's relevant.
And they're certainly not limited to the community panel representatives that have been engaged thus far. It can expand and include others.
I suppose because it's sort of an early sort of stage, we're not, as Irina said, we're not too sure exactly who's likely to respond at this stage. We'll sort of be evaluating their community engagement and placemaking plan as part of their submission. So we'll bear that in mind as well.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other queries? Henley.
Sorry, Peter. Yeah. I was just wondering whether the SLA, people can answer question other than, can I ask any other questions like the SLA? Not the one about the presentation.
Can we just keep, there are still questions about the Gold Creek Homestead. So if we have other questions, we can come back to them.
Okay.
Cool. Lena online said, does the community have a say in what type of development it would like the tenderer to propose? That seems to be less about what we want to be. The presentation seemed to be less about we want to be involved. Okay, can we review the tenders before a choice is made? That seemed to be less about we want to be involved to can we review the tenders before a choice is made? I say yes. So does the community get a say in the actual tender evaluation or what type of development might end up happening?
Yeah, so at the moment, the evaluation does not include a public display of the received tenders, predominantly because this is a commercial in confidence process, and we don't envisage to be consulting necessarily on what others have proposed. There may be an opportunity to discuss it as we go through the process and seek some advice from the community panel, in particular, about how certain developments have met the criteria. But at this point in time, a consultation on the receipt of proposals is not part of the process.
Okay. Thank you. Certainly, I mean, there have been a couple of comments around we need aged care and so on. And I guess how much of the tender evaluation will also be guided by the overall needs of the community in Gungahlin. You know, where is Gungahlin suffering a shortfall in community services? And I kind of know the answer to that question in many areas, but you know, what input are you taking from the Community Services Directorate on the needs of the community?
So the tender documentation clearly outlines what is the criteria that the tenderers need to consider in preparing their response. And any elements that we have identified will be measured against in terms of evaluation. At this stage, it will be difficult to actually start adding new criteria into the tender process. So for that reason, we have given a little bit of flexibility to the proponents to think about a range of uses that they could propose for the site rather than identify a specific use for the site. And that's sort of the principle of a precinct as opposed to a development of a particular use. So we certainly are making references to a number of government policies and studies that are being made, including the community assessment across Gungahlin, the community needs assessment across Gungahlin. It's an attached document in the tender, again, for them to consider and identify what gaps that might exist in that document they are able to fill for this particular site.
Okay, thank you. I think Terence, did you want to ask a question or follow up on that, or it was more of a comment?
Yeah, no, I can ask it. So I suppose there's just two comments. Just to go back to the question about would residents have an opportunity to comment? I mean, I would suggest that there's nothing commercial in confidence, but within the process for the tenderer to develop a watered down version of the proposal that didn't have commercial in confidence information that could be displayed to the public, which then the SLA could get community feedback on the designs. Again, this is community engagement, right? Not community direction, because there seems to be a tendency sometimes for community engagement or processes not to listen to the residents around. And the more you can broaden it and the longer you can engage the community up until that final decision, the better outcome you're going to have for the whole community, rather than just potentially a few within government or government officers that may think it's the right choice for that community. The other one I want to ask, and it may be already been done, is focus groups are all very well and sit in the same boat, moving into a suburb where there's already a development of sort of such nature, being the Mulligan's Flat Learning Centre. But, you know, when you talk to Mulligan's Flat Centre, they say, well, we engaged 3 years ago. The focus group then said this was good, right? Well, what necessarily worked then doesn't necessarily work now. So if you started your consultation process that time ago, there's a potential that community sentiment has changed. It all depends on, again, what's being proposed. So to bring the community along the line, has a more broader survey been undertaken in USA to see what people would like to be on there? I suppose that's the broadest possible or easiest way to get that. So again, it can be as inclusive as possible. So you're not having to go back and reset expectations later.
So the question was, I think the specific question was a broad-based community consultation made, and why can't the community be involved in this actual decision? Yeah, or contribute towards it, not making it. Obviously, not. I would suggest not making the decision. Well, I mean, arguably, the process that we have been the members of the panel have, and that we've produced a set of requirements that capture what the community expects. But you know, anyway. So Irina, can you comment? Have you got a? Sorry, Peter.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that you potentially, obviously you've been involved, and this is my first meeting, so apologies for interjecting and talking so much. But again, as I say, I'm coming into a situation in another suburb where somebody else was involved in the community group and not the community that's there now. So the more broader you can obtain and get, like the gentleman was asking about the community gardens, why isn't SLA taking his name and details to say, well, when that tender comes up, I will pass on your details to make sure that they talk to you? Why does she have to go back and think about it to go, well, how do we include them? He's just asked to be included. So take his details down and make it known and let them communicate. You know, it's not hard to be open and engaging. To me, that seems a bit exclusive and, well, we'll see, we'll come back to you later. But he's offering now, asking now, you know, what's the harm?
Sorry, yeah, I don't necessarily think that it's a case of when we're not keen on, you know, taking the community along for the ride, but you know, we're trying to include the community moving forward as part of you know, that community engagement and placemaking plan that we're requesting from developers, well, where they're going to, you know, provide us with, you know, what their view of the world is, I suppose, for then us to sort of take that on board and make sure that the community is taken along for that ride from the time that they exchange contracts. Irina, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so just
exchanging contracts is too late.
Answer the questions in order of a request, and I can see Natalie sort of ready to respond probably to the initial question, which was about the capturing of information from a broader community and more in relation to how did we actually establish the community panel. So I'll just let Natalie speak to that.
Thank you, Irina. Hi, everyone. So I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Manager at SLA. My name is Natalie. And I can just, in answer to your question, Terence, around, I guess, particularly with Gold Creek, in that example, we put an expression of interest out to the community in, I think it was August, September, maybe earlier, July last year, and asked people in the community. We letterboxed many of the streets around the Gungahlin Gold Creek homestead and asked people to express their interest in being involved in a panel. And then we got a big, well, I got quite a good response. And then we, from that, selected a panel that we felt was representative of community from lots of different backgrounds, as diverse as possible, and ensured then that we were able to go forward with a group of people in this very, for us, you know, quite a special process of trying to identify what people connected to around the place. What was it that was special about it? And Irina's already spoken a little bit about the approach we did with that. So I just want to let you know that occurred in advance of the panel. And then we worked very closely with that panel over, you know, three-month period, I think, Peter, and had them show up very regularly and communicated with them on a regular basis. And as we've expressed, we'll be looking to continue. For those that wish to continue in that arrangement, they will be offered the opportunity. But I think also, as Irina has indicated, there'll be opportunity for other people to get involved in that too. So it's an ongoing thing from our end. That's my.
All right. Look, I'm a little bit sensitive to time here, and I know that a couple of the other topics here are likely to get a few questions as well. But I would encourage people to have a look at the link I've posted in the chat. There is a lot of material here, and this engagement is notably deep and high quality compared to some other things that are going on. You know, it's not perfect. I mean, maybe 30 years ago we should have started this conversation when the site first fell out of private hands, but it's been done pretty well now. So with that, unless there's more burning questions, and we can come back to them later perhaps, I might ask Natalie to move on to the next chunk, which is either Mingle or the community gardens.
Yes, well, kind of the same. So I'm going to handball to Simone Penthickerman and Jason Cummings. So Simone is the SLA Mingle manager, and Jason Cummings is the GM at the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust, and they're going to talk a bit about the Throsby Community Garden.
Thanks very much, Natalie. As Natalie said, I'm the manager of the Northside Mingle programs, and I too would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as the traditional custodians of the land that I think all of us are on in this virtual space. Mingle is the Suburban Land Agency's community development team, and we work in new suburbs as the residents are moving in, and we work with the residents to connect with each other, to form networks and groups, and to find the ways for them to have the supports that they need to have connected communities where they can live a great life and the communities can thrive. And so, you know, most of all, we are really talking to people on the ground, and people on the ground have expressed to us a strong interest in community gardens. And the Suburban Land Agency did not have the capacity to build and run a community garden in Throsby. But in early 2020, we've finalised a partnership with the Mulligan's Flat Woodlands Sanctuary around the development of the new learning centre. And through that partnership, there arose an opportunity to potentially develop a community garden adjacent to the Sanctuary Learning Centre. So we're supporting the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust and the Throsby residents and residents of nearby suburbs to determine the viability of the community garden adjacent to the Learning Centre. And so as a community development program, Mingle won't have an ongoing involvement in the operation of the garden. That will be up to the community if indeed the community decides that that is what it wants. But we are supporting the community engagement around that. And the first stage of that community engagement is what I think Terence has just described as the broadest possible engagement, which is the survey on your say. And we encourage everybody to take part in that survey, where we're interested in all points of view about this project. And the survey is open until July the 17th. And I'm going to hand over to Jason, who's going to talk a little bit more about the project.
Thanks, Simone. Thanks, Peter, for having us back. The Sanctuary's been a long journey, and we'll continue to engage the community at every step along the way. We attend Mingle events routinely, Facebook, we come to Gungahlin Community Council all the time. So thanks for this opportunity to keep that process going. So we are a not-for-profit organisation, an independent not-for-profit. The Suburban Land Agency is partnering with us at the visitor centre. And when this idea came up from the community that they wanted a community garden, And we discussed that with Mingle. I said to Suburban Land Agency, look, it's a beautiful idea, but it's very easy for community members to put their hand up and say, we want a community garden. But the actual likelihood of transitioning that into a number of individuals who are going to turn up week in, week out over a 52-week period across 4 or 5 years is ultimately what's going to determine the viability of a community garden, wherever it is. So I think it was probably my idea to, I suggested that we do a community survey at the outset, just to really test that demand and whether people putting their hand up saying we want a community garden is actually going to transition into a viable proposition. Because what we won't do is set up something that is going to fail, or something that's going to be poorly maintained, or something that the community is not interested in. Because A, it costs money, B, it'll reflect on our reputation, and C, probably the most important thing is it'll be reflected in the visitor centre experience overall. And our aspiration is that that is a top-notch experience and not one that we would compromise with a pile of weeds on the edge of the site. So people should be aware, and you may have discussed it at the last council meeting, that there is a policy and a set of guidelines about what a community garden needs to meet, the criteria for which or the things it needs to address. And there's actually 25 criteria there that need to be met before Transport and City Services will approve a community garden going ahead. And so this actual site stacks up okay against those criteria. And some of the issues wherever a community garden is going to be developed are things like security of the site, access to services, electricity, potable water, off-street parking, having an entity, a governance entity for the community garden. So as a not-for-profit, we've got public liability insurance, etc. So we can actually take it on and look after it, ultimately be responsible for maintenance, insurance, presentation of the place, and then closure. If it doesn't work, actually pulling it back out again and tidying it up. So any other sites in Gungahlin that are mooted will need to jump through all those hoops. And so I guess the opportunity here on the positive side is that if the Gungahlin community and Throsby residents and Ford residents, Harrison residents, if they want a community garden and they can demonstrate commitment to it and so that it will be viable, we have an opportunity to leverage off the community facilities that we're developing in the visitor centre. So toilets, potable water, electricity, all that stuff we've got to pay for up front is stuff that you need for a community garden. So there is no guarantee that it's going to go ahead at Throsby. It's not decided that is the case. And again, from my perspective, we need to be convinced that there is demand for it, and that there are going to be enough people to turn up week in, week out to make it a viable proposition. So that's probably, and the other thing I'd say, just off of the back of Simone's stuff, this is just the start of the community engagement. So the traction that we're getting with all the commentary is fantastic. We want all this feedback. We want to take it on board, and we need people to fill out the survey and put their details down and be available for future workshops. There'll be a series of workshops on the back of the survey where we invite people to the table at the Ford Community Centre probably to further the conversation.
Off mute, that helped. Thanks, Jason. So presumably the site in Throsby is, kind of being chosen because it's adjacent to the Mulligan's Flat Centre, right? As opposed to anything else. It was, why not? Well, yeah. Yeah,
pretty much. And not only do we have the infrastructure there, it's actually the notion of community gardening and the environmental education opportunities that come with it are not a long way away from what we're doing around the nature engagement at the centre anyhow. So the principles of community gardening align nicely with the principles of the environmental ethos that we're trying to deliver to the community at the centre more broadly.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'll throw the floor open to questions. Just send me a chat or unmute and blurt out if there's a silence.
Jason, it's Imran here. Just a question for something like this. If there was the survey is successful in terms of a high number of interest for a community garden, with anything to start up, and I guess question for Simone, will Mingle, I guess, assist establishing and driving it to its maturity, so the residents or the community can actually manage it from a point. So, you know, you can set it all up and whatnot, but along early days, you need someone to hold your hand to get it right, so to speak.
Mingle will be involved in supporting the community engagement and supporting the workshops. There are a whole number of different ways that Mingle could be involved, and it could be in the setting up of different partnerships with other community organisations. Certainly we've had some meetings with COGS and with Jason out on site. We've already worked with CIT, community development students. There's sort of a whole range of ways that Mingle can assist with getting this project off the ground. But the ultimate aim of any community development program is that you support something to be sustainable, and then you move on to support the next thing. And that is one of the real benefits of the partnership with the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust. And Jason, I thought, touched on that really well in what he said in this sort of ongoing support that the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust would be able to offer.
The key thing is the ongoing support to a point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that would be with the Woodlands and Wetlands Trust.
Cool. Terence is back for a second bite. Jerry has a question or two. Terence?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm going to try to reserve most of myself for another email to Mingle and back into the community. First of all, obviously, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in the community survey. Just one thing I'd like to point out, and also it's great that there's community engagement in terms of the survey. It's most certainly from the point of the way that it's presented on the ORSE website, the way that the survey is structured, it leads one to think that the community gardens are fait accompli. Now, I do hear Jason and Simone saying that not necessarily, it's potential, but all of the literature and the way it's written is in the way that it's happening. To the extent that the survey actually does not give you an opportunity to object or to engage in constructive dialogue back with the survey with regards to the site or to the occasion, it's focused purely on whether there's interest in people wanting to garden rather than people that may not want or may not think it's a suitable site for the location. So that's just one feedback and comment. The next one is, thanks Jason for mentioning the guide. I just wanted to confirm with the SLA, is the Guide to Community Gardens in the ACT February 2016 the current version of the guide, policy and site selection criteria?
Terence, I had a look at the link you'd sent through to us today, and it certainly appeared to me to be the same guide that we've been referring to.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, I suppose so my biggest problem at the moment is just sort of whilst it's great to be engaged, just the way that the engagement is delivered is delivered in a manner that doesn't necessarily engage constructive discussion around the site and leads to an outcome that potentially is already determined. The question is, Jason, is what's obviously you being the licensed or the insured party would be responsible, would manage and coordinate the garden as the party or the non-community organisation, not-for-profit. What do you envision as your stakeholder in it or your use of the community garden?
Yeah, I'm not. I guess in some ways we see it as us providing a service to the community. So it's sort of the other way around. It's sort of like we heard from Mingle and others that the community garden is wanted in Gungahlin, if you like. I think I understand the nearest one is Mitchell. And we just saw an opportunity to serve the community, which is our mission, really, at the end of the day. There'll be other opportunities for us within our block, for example, within our block boundaries, to grow native plants for use in our cafe. So we don't necessarily need the community garden in and of itself. It's more about our role as a community service agent, really. And the community saying to Mingle, we need a community garden, and we saying, well, we could maybe help you out with that. So yeah, I don't think we don't need for there to be a community garden.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thanks very much. In your current, or the one that's published on your website, the current building plan shows the moving of the predator-proof fence, which seems to indicate that it's going through where the area that's demarcated. Is that fence still going to be built through there, or would that change if this garden went ahead?
No, so the whole concept of the building is that you walk through the building and you enter into the sanctuary. So to make that operational and functional, we need to move the alignment of the foxproof fence. And so in the DA documentation, there's a quadrant of land, if you like, where it comes across, and that will connect to the front of the building. And then on the other side of the building, on the eastern side, there's a similar situation where we isolate a small triangle of land to give effect to that aspiration, really. So it doesn't really relate to whether the community garden goes ahead or not, but that fence will go ahead.
Oh yeah, which is fine, not a problem. But the visitor centre would be in the park; it wouldn't be in the community, because the way the fence goes currently, it sort of cuts right through where the community garden is proposed.
Yeah, so there's two. So the area, if you like, north of what will become the new foxproof fence, that will basically be back of house area to the visitor centre. So not publicly accessible when you come through the visitor centre, but not accessible from the Throsby side. I think that's what you're talking about. And then so that little patch of land basically gets cut off from the urban open space. And then it can be used in our back of house, and then the vast majority of that block is either unchanged or is potentially available for a community garden.
Yeah, right. Just to make a comment, yeah, definitely there are other community gardens in the Gungahlin area. One obviously being the one in Mitchell, run by I think the Organic Society, and there's also one, in fact, just down the road in Mapleton Street, which is run by the community centre, I think, that's inside just around Sapling Street and Mapleton. So there are definitely other community gardens in close proximity to Throsby that I suppose could potentially be used.
Yes. Terence, I might just jump in here. I'm really sensitive to the amount of time we have here, and
sure.
Let
one more question.
Anyone. No, I've got one pending. David, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just a quick one. The survey's been open for about a week and it's got a week and a half to go. Have there been many responses? Is there much engagement happening yet?
Yes, we've certainly had over 30 responses, and we're getting more every day.
Sounds good.
And
we'll take an action to email out the survey as well as posting it on Facebook, which we've already done.
Peter, can I just quickly add that if people in that survey, the last question does just say, broadly speaking, what else would you like to tell us? So I do welcome anyone that does have concerns, that is a place where you can put that, and people have been putting that. So, please use the survey to its fullest extent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, look, there are actually a bunch of questions I'd like to ask as well, but I think we might park it there because Peter Steele's been very patiently waiting, and I did promise him he'd be on about 7:30. Terence, I don't want to kill the conversation, but we're just going to run out of time now, and I'm happy to pick it up and go further. But it has a lot of broad-based interest, and a lot of people are trying to work out, how do I get a garden happening? Where can I put a garden, and what other elements going on? So we probably might need to have a separate community garden forum thing, so the gig can come together. That's Gardens in Gungahlin. Yeah, I made that up myself. All right, look.
Thank you for having us, Peter.
That's all right. Was there anything about Mingle that you wanted to add, Simone, or we're going to park it there?
No, I really think it's time for the other speakers. Thank you.
Oh, yes. It's nothing like a discussion about public transport to get the community rolled up. And no better person around to lead that than Peter Steele. So thank you very much, Simone and Natalie and Irina and Ashley for your contributions. We do appreciate them. All right, Pete, tell us what's happening with Network 19 and the update. And sorry for keeping you so long, but as you can see, we've got big stuff going on in here in Gungahlin.
Oh, it's always a very active community council when we speak to you, Peter. So it's good to see that still going on. Thanks for having me tonight, everyone. This is the second Zoom meeting I've done. I just spoke to Tuggeranong last night, so I'm still getting the hang of it. So if you bear with me, I'd appreciate it. Peter, the approach I was looking at for this evening, is just to run through this presentation if you're able to share it, and I'll speak through to it, and then we can take questions at the end if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I am semi under control at this time.
Brilliant.
Click share screen, find that button. That is that one. Share that. So in theory, people should be being razzled and dazzled by a big blue background.
There it is there.
Yep.
All right, so if we can, I'll just give you a nudge, Pete, every time we need to move along, if that's okay. But if we can kick off. So again, everyone, welcome and thanks for having me again. What I'm here to let you know about is that the government or Transport Canberra will be changing the public transport network. And I just want to take you through. There's quite a bit of history here. Of course, the COVID pandemic has been a big issue for us that we've been working through, and we're continuing to work through with today's announcements as well. We'll be very vigilant about that. But the background here, of course, is that, as I'm sure everyone can well remember, in April 2019, the light rail started, and the bus network redesign came along with it to complement that light rail service. There's been a real lot of work that I know that myself and my colleagues have put in since then, speaking to groups like yourself, community groups, but also going out to schools and school communities to speak with schools. And I'll touch on a little bit of how that's worked for us further into the deck. I'm going to go ahead there, Pete. So what's changing now is that from the Sunday, the 18th of July, which will be in time for term 3 on Monday the 20th, we're implementing a complete timetable change across the city. That'll come with some changes to some routes. Most of those are more in the middle or the south of the city. There's not that many up north this time around, and some targeted changes for schools that I'll touch on as well. Next one. We've really focused through this design, as I said, speaking a lot with the community and trying to follow some really key themes across the city. And actually, I've just noticed that a slide's dropped out of my slide deck that I've sent you, Pete. But what I was going to just let everybody know is that the COVID challenge has been massive for us in the transport industry, not just here in Canberra, worldwide. We were looking at getting we're probably going to be about 3.9 million journeys short of where we wanted to be on our network this year. And you can really see that from about the 16th of March this year that our ridership really started to reduce. The reason, and that's the reason why this network wasn't originally put in earlier. Part of the reason why we're putting it in now is kind of twofold, is it puts a lot more service in the network. So as you'll see in Gungahlin, every single bus on the network during the week is going to half hourly all day, some up from hourly, and that gives people more options to travel and put some more capacity on the service. There'll be more capacity on the light rail service with increased headways during peak times. So that'll help people distance for those who have to travel at the moment. What it also means is that when we are in a position, and hopefully that's not too far away, when we are in a position to welcome people back onto the public transport network, the network will be ready to take them and we can get people moving around the city again. This change, these are kind of some of the principles that we've aimed for, and that's across the network. Some are more key to the Gungahlin region. Really key though to what we're doing is putting more services on the road. So there'll be another 692 services in the network, really pushing that frequency up across the city, which is about 17.5% on the current timetable. Just next one there, Pete. And apologies, that's a bit hard to read. I'll just take you through it. In the Gungahlin region, there's, as I said before, the light rail increasing the peak frequencies and moving up to a 5-minute headway is, I think, really important for your region, because the light rail service, I think, no surprise to anyone who's been on it during the peak period, really quite heavily used and a lot of ridership there. And I think as we start to see that come back, as I said, having that capacity there will be very helpful. One of the big changes, we've had a lot of conversations with the Mitchell Traders Association and people who are travelling to and from Mitchell, and it was a bit isolated the way the network works. So the Route 18 is now going to continue to Dixon. What that means for the moment is that until the new stop is built, which has also been announced, the Mitchell Light Rail stop, is that the bus access will be much easier for people from around the city. You'll be able to make a connection in Dixon, whereas prior, people from all over the city trying to access Mitchell would have to go a long way. Probably the other really two key changes to the routes in the Gungahlin region is the change of the 23 and the 24, and that's kind of reverting a bit to what we saw in previous networks, which is they will travel, rather than travelling just back in and out of the town centre, they'll travel through to Belconnen. Another good thing about this network is that we're also getting the buses in early to Taylor up in the north there. So as the road networks come into play, we've extended the 25 and the 26 through. Next one, Pete. We've also had some really good engagement with the school communities around the city, and this kind of covers off just kind of some of the high level things that we're doing in the schools. In particular, we've had some really good conversations with the communities out there and the principals at Good Shepherd Primary and Amaroo School up in the north of Gungahlin. And out of that, we've designed 3 new school special services to help the students through there. So that was a really great outcome of having good conversations with the schools directly and understanding what the needs of their communities were, and also working with the schools to understand where their catchments are, so where the kids really are and how we can make sure we can pick more of them up. There's other changes for students travelling outside of Gungahlin, so there are some routes that we've made a bit better to Radford and to SFX to make the travel times quicker for the kids, so they're not sitting on the buses as long. Next one, Pete. I have kind of touched on this already, but just to reiterate, there'll be more light rail services starting from term 3 as well. And another one for the weekend travellers is instead of starting at 8 AM on Sundays, the light rail services will be starting at 7. So that's helpful. We know that people have been wanting to travel earlier on Sunday mornings. And I'll also mention again, of course, too, that the recent announcement and commitment to the Mitchell light rail stop has come through as well. Next one. So just to let everybody know is that, just say again, is that the network starting, the timetable change is starting on the 18th, the Saturday, but the full changes for school students will be starting on the 20th of July. All of the information is available at the Transport Canberra website, particularly for school students and for parents and communities. A really popular thing that we've done and we've had some great feedback on is our school packs. So for any school in the ACT, if you want to know how you can travel via public transport, you go to the Transport website, you can look up by school and you can look at your individual school. There's also going to be paper timetables that will start to be out at the major stations and interchanges for anyone who needs them. And just next one. So I've just thrown this one in here because it's a popular one. I think I've spoken about it every time that I've come to Gungahlin, but I'll just touch on it again, which is about a direct bus from Gungahlin to Tuggeranong. Just a few really key points here is that the network we've designed at the moment that we're running is really to prioritise all-day travel over peak specific services. And what that means is we're trying to make routes run frequently all day rather than just during peak periods. Of course, for Gungahlin, that means that your light rail services run with a really good span of hours and they run frequently. I can just tell you as well is that just looking at the journey from the journey data from pre-COVID times, is we're only seeing about, I think that actually counts up to about 16 people that we can see making a journey from Gungahlin to Tuggeranong on the transport services at the moment. The other thing that you'll see, and you can see in the graph there, is that not everyone travels at the same time of day. So I spoke about this last time I was at the Gungahlin Community Council and said that one of the challenges is that when do people want to leave? So if you have a bus, and a bus, bit of the math behind it, a bus costs $500,000. So if you have a $500,000 bus, you want to get people from Gungahlin to Tuggeranong, but some people want to leave at 6:30 and some people want to leave at 7:30. Do we need 2 buses? Do we need $1 million worth of buses to run this service? So that's one of the things that we think about as operators, which is, do we invest that money to do that, or do we move people through the network where we know they can make that trip already using the light rail and using the rapid 4 down to Tuggeranong? I know there's a travel time cost there, but they're the kind of decisions we need to make as providing public transport. And the other point there is that there are priorities in the fleet. We may have buses that are already overflowing, not so much now with the COVID, but hopefully when we can get back to normal. We've also got new areas in Canberra where we want to extend. Gungahlin will be continuing to grow, so we'll want to make sure that we can get services out there as early as we can, like we're doing with Taylor. For me, Molonglo's growing as well. We've also got demand from school students, which are continuing to grow and we're continuing to keep an eye on. So that's just my perspective on this request that comes up a lot. That's just a bit of background from a transport planning kind of reasoning as to why that bus route doesn't exist. And just the next one there, Pete. And just another one that comes up is, just let everybody know, is that the commitment to increase services on the weekend is for term 4 at the moment. Unfortunately, one of the things that we haven't been able to do through the COVID pandemic is train bus drivers, because it really involves people sitting behind the wheel of a bus and doing a lot of one-on-one training or very close quarters training with trainers. So those training classes have started to ramp back up again. So term 4 is when we're looking to increase the service levels on the weekends. Paper timetables, as I said, they'll be available very shortly. One of the big changes on the network is the Rapid 5. Probably not that big an impact for people in the Gungahlin region, as once you get into the city, there's 3 rapid buses and a frequent route to get you to either Russell or Barton. Park and ride, I know something that comes up a lot, Peter, as well, is that there is a park and ride strategy under development that'll be released shortly, and I'll make sure that my colleagues come and speak to you about that one. And with schools, as I said, not a lot of change, a few key ones. So for Amaroo and Good Shepherd up in the Gungahlin region, but everything is available at a school level on the Transport Canberra website. And that's me done.
As the slide says, any questions?
Yeah, can I just jump in for one?
Oh, yeah, David. Ooh,
the Gungahlin to Tuggeranong bus, I see the data. I'm pretty happy with that. Just curious, from a more abstract point of view, though, you've got 16 people who currently make the trip. How do you factor in people who might make the trip if it was more convenient? So not necessarily about that bus service. I definitely work up here in Gungahlin, so it doesn't bother me. But yeah, how do you factor in the possible growth?
It's a really interesting one. So certainly we could undertake community surveys, and we could go out and speak more about what that bus could do. My feeling and my experience is that the community would probably have higher expectations for a $500,000 bus, again, like another school bus or something. That's just my experience. In terms of something like a bus like this, is that I think it's a really good one where the public transport, and last time I was in Gungahlin, I was asked about a bus direct to the airport from Gungahlin as well, which is another one that comes up sometimes, is that sometimes you can't replace every car trip in the ACT with a public transport trip. And I think that's something that we need to really acknowledge, is that what we're trying to do is move as many people through the high demand areas as possible. There will always be trips that really the most efficient and effective way to do it perhaps isn't putting in a public transport service. If we started to see something different, or If there was real identifier for it, then we could change our minds. But for the moment, yeah, the demand, I don't see the demand being there, and there's so many priorities on the network for me.
No, I'm not talking about that one specifically. It was more about how do you extrapolate what a change in service might mean for other people. But you said something like community surveys and community engagement, and also I guess listening to feedback and things like that.
Yeah, it's really our best option for that kind of thing.
No worries, thanks.
Hey, thanks Peter Steele for coming down and doing the presentation. Thanks for showing the data, like with the 16 people going to Tuggahlin. Even though it's so inconvenient currently because they have to catch multiple buses, I'm pretty sure there are plenty of people who would take the buses if there is a provision or if there's something available to do them. Like a direct bus to Warden, and from there they can probably get a connecting bus to Tuggahlin. So I think the data, I appreciate this, the data you showed, but I think it's not relevant to the issue that's happening, especially if you think, it's like saying, okay, there's no one is taking buses to from Gungahlin to city because there's no buses running. So you can't compare those data. We have to compare apple with apples. So what I would propose is like you can either take a survey or try a minibus or those kind of things, because at the moment, Gungahlin is the only suburb being disconnected with the other districts. And you're talking about the cost. With the cost, everything has a cost. You know what I mean? Like, so you have to invest on some of the infrastructure and looking on the green energy and stuff. I think it's time to invest on the bus, or there should be at least you should find some kind of data which would justify your answer. So yeah, that's my question. So you need to plan on come up with a strategy where we can go forward.
Oh, okay, I'll take that as a comment.
Just to balance that, our own survey statistics, when we asked people where they worked, asked Gungahlin residents where they worked, out of 1,417 responses, 1.48% or 21 responses indicated they worked in Tuggahlin, and 6% or 85 people indicated they worked in Western Creek Woden. So I guess the challenge is, do we invest in resources to support less than 10% of the population, or do we try to, in their needs, or we try to get 90, try to address the 90? And, again, there is a finite budget. So I don't know, Peter, one of the specific instances I've had is I've had a couple of people comment that it's very hard to get from Gungahlin to a medical appointment at the Canberra hospital. Often can take 4 buses, one in at least a minimum 3, but it can be as many as 4 buses.
Yeah,
and it ends up being almost an unworkably long solution. What scope is there for through the day on demand service to support that specific need around healthcare?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. That's a really good point. So the thing about Canberra, it's about I think now with Gungahlin growing as well, it might be about 50 kilometres top to bottom. So it's actually a really long way, and the hospital is a challenging spot. It's not really central in that it's not in the town centre. It's a bit off to the edge. So it is difficult for us to serve with public transport, but where it's located, we'd have to talk to someone from back in the National Capital Planning Department to ask them why they went and stuck it over on the edge.
With respect, it used to be in the middle of the lake.
Yes. With regards to what you're raising there is, though, a really good point, which is that, and it's kind of been a bit of a theme for mine as I've come around and spoken to people in the community, which is that the $500,000 action bus or Transport Canberra bus certainly cannot solve all of the needs of all of the needs of the community and the mobility needs of the community. The flexible bus service certainly is one part of that that's already running, and that's to offer people movement within districts, but also to health appointments. And I think that looking forward and how the transport sector is changing, having high frequency, high volume movement of people on a network, and then having complementary services to help people get to appointments that need to be more direct. I think that's a really important part that we need to start to grow and expand on, because then we can do both. If you try and do everything just with the big buses, you'll actually end up achieving neither of them, because the buses won't be quick and fast and direct and attractive for people to use. And then also they'll only be moving people around very infrequently. So there's a balance for us to strike and to look at different products. And that really includes that the e-scooters, the bikes, the cycling, the walking, that's also part of that product suite. But for people who really need that mobility option, things like expansion of the flexible bus service or on-demand type services, that's really where I think we should focus and expand moving forward, particularly to help people access services like the hospital.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? I'm noting that it is sneaking up to bedtime, or second shift time for those of us who are doing that as well. Well, look, all right. Well, Peter, look, it sounded good when we were talking about this back in April with the changes. So it's good to see that they've landed, and good to hear that those schools that were pretty vocal about the new bus network have got some love, so to speak, and a solution for them. So I hope that works out well. I am going to wrap this up, unless anyone's got any further questions they'd like to raise with Community Council. I've had a bit of feedback from a couple of people relating to the community gardens conversation and the fact that it was chopped off. And all I can say is I can assure you we've got the message very clearly, and that if necessary, we'll run a separate campaign outside the scope of the normal public meetings to make sure everyone who wants to be heard is heard, and those messages are passed on to the SLA. I don't think we have anyone left from the SLA on. So, Peter, again, thank you for your time. I'll leave you
yeah, thanks again. Appreciate it.
To drop off. And if anyone's got any further questions, I'm happy to hang around for another 5 or 10 minutes and chat. Any other closing concerns?
Thanks, Peter. Well done.
No worries. All quiet. Okay. All right. Well, thanks all. Have a great week. And well, I guess we'll see you in August.
Yes.
Good night, all.
Good night, Peter.